There's a lot of inversions that are going on in the West right now. And I'll tell you one of the greatest inversions. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. And this is putting the whims and priorities and feelings of adults over the needs and care of children. I had 19,000 followers on Twitter at the time. And I was like, I don't know what I've done, but I've just done something. I'm looking at my phone. I'm just I'd rather not have to constantly, every single day, nonstop, be completely fighting against the culture. I'm happy to fight when I need to fight, but there's just this sort of nonstop. If you're someone who's more, for lack of a better term, conservative, or at this point I would just say sane, and you live in a country like the UK or the US or Canada, it's like there's this nonstop battle now against the culture and against the politics and against the media and all of these things. And it's a fight that's absolutely worth fighting, but you shouldn't have to. People didn't need to have to fight against the culture so much, and now you do. We can make some predictions. Like, I'm happy to make sort of generalized predictions. I see more multipolarity.
Right.
I see a huge amount of migration. When we think about migration right now, people tend to think of it from east to west. People tend to think, well, everyone wants to come to the US. Everyone wants to go to Canada. Everyone wants to come to the UK. I'm seeing a lot of west to east immigration going on. So I cannot even remember what the question you asked me at this point is. But yeah, I think that maybe I just needed to get that off my chest.
ZUBY, thank you so much for joining me today and being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. ZUBY is a rapper, an author, a public speaker, a coach, host of Real Talk with ZUBY podcast, and most importantly, someone that many look to for making some sanity and common sense out of the world we live in today. Thank you, sir, for joining me.
Appreciate it, Brandon. Thanks for inviting me.
So for people that don't know you, I would love for you just for a minute or two, for you to kind of just dive into, what makes you you, more importantly. So your story a little bit, but also for the people that do know you a little bit more, you are famous for doing some outlandish things here and there, garnering attention over time, I guess, maybe to put it conservatively. So I would love for you to just kind of dive in that for a minute or two, so people can get a picture and some context for who you are and what makes you you.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Well, you've explained my occupations. So professionally, I'm a musician, author. I run a big podcast called Real Talk with ZUBY. Well, pretty big, good scale, got a lot of listeners. I also do public speaking, and I do social media coaching as well as some life and fitness coaching as well. I'm the author of 2 books, including Strong Advice, ZUBY's Guide to Fitness for Everybody, as well as my children's book, The Candy Calamity. And I'll also be releasing a 3rd book, if all goes to plan, next year. And that's really going to be the big one. In terms of my background, I was born in England. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So I'm British by birth. I know I don't sound it. My accent confuses everyone because I didn't grow up over there. I grew up in the Middle East. I went to actually an American/international school from kindergarten up until 5th grade. When I was 11 years old, I went to the UK for boarding school. So from the ages of 11 to 20, I was living in Saudi Arabia, but I was in school and then eventually university in the UK. I'm a graduate of Oxford University. I have a degree in computer science, and it was at Oxford University where I also began my music career. I released my first hip hop album called Commercial Underground way back in 2006 independently. And after I graduated, I pursued music full-time for 1 year right after graduation. Then I moved to London. I worked in the corporate world as a management consultant for 3 years from, let me get this right, 2008 to 2011. And then late 2011, I quit my job and I became a full-time rapper. And so for the past 13 years, I have been self-employed. I've been carving out my own career, firstly, just as a musician. I say just, being a musician involves a lot of things, but anyone who knew me from any time prior to 2019 would have simply known me as a rapper. And then in 2019, I started to add additional strings to the bow. I released my first book. I started my own podcast. I had my first appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience and lots of other very prominent podcasts and shows and television programs and things like that. That's when I sort of started to blow up, as we say. And for the past several years, things have just gone from strength to strength. My audience has continued to grow. Beginning in 2019, after 10 plus years on social media. I can remember the numbers clearly. Beginning of 2019, across all the platforms combined, I had about 50,000 followers. And here we are 5 years later, and I've now got about 2 million across the platforms, including over 1.2 million on X, which is the platform where I'm best known.
It's amazing. It's an incredible story, and some exponential growth, which we're seeing a lot of exponential things today, like exponential craziness, exponential debt. So people are getting familiar with that word, even though humans don't know exponentials very well. I had the pleasure of meeting you almost 2 years ago at Pacific Bitcoin 2022. That was my first Bitcoin event. There's been a lot of things there was a lot of things we talked about at that time. I'll never forget. It was just because it was my first event. There was the 10 of us sitting in the little dark area, just kind of talking. I think 10 dudes just kind of talking about the problems of the world, and all of us kind of given our different situations and what we're seeing. And a lot's happened since then too. What's the most concerning thing in the world today, in your opinion?
Man, that is a huge question. On a global scale, on a global scale, the birth rates. If I think about the entire world, I think the birth rates are the biggest global problem because of the implications, and also because a lot of people think the problem is the actual opposite. So every single developed country in the world, with the exception of Israel, has a below replacement fertility rate now. Every single one. Places like South Korea are below 1. So if you think the replacement rate is 2.1 births per woman, South Korea, I believe, is now down to about 0.7, 0.8. So if things don't turn around there in that country, they're scheduled for over a 90% population decline over a few generations, which should absolutely terrify people. You don't need to be Korean to just think, whoa, a 90% population decline. Meanwhile, you have people running around thinking that the world is overpopulated, and the problem is that there's too many people and people need to stop having children because of the environment. The only reason why the numbers are sustaining and even growing in developed countries is because of immigration. So countries like our nations, the USA, the UK, France, Germany, whatever it is, they're just importing so many people from other nations that they're sort of artificially propping up their numbers. And then secondly, of course, increased life expectancy. So people are living longer than they used to. And as a result, you can have a massive tanking, a massive dip in the birth rate. And it seems like everything is fine because the sort of total population number is staying steady, or it's rising slowly. But once those older people start to die out, then if subsequent generations are quite literally just not replacing ourselves, then there's not really going to be much of a future for humanity. So I say that's the biggest issue, because we're kind of collectively failing at the most basic thing that animals are supposed to do, which is reproduce and keep our numbers sustained. So beyond all the other sort of complicated issues, I think that's just like the most basic survival one.
I love that, and I love that you said that. You're not going to hear it very often, but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that you say that. You're always a maverick in that regard. But again, it's something that people like you hear about here and there, but it doesn't get enough airtime. What do you think about something we talked about 2 years ago? Again, I remember sitting in a circle of just like this Malthusian plan, really, like you mentioned, climate change, this overarching global problem. They admitted themselves, decades ago, we need something so big that it galvanizes the world together for our agenda. Do you think that's just part of the plan? I mean, it seems like it is to me, but what is your take on this Malthusian kind of globalist plan to seemingly, whether it's Bill Gates and saying, hey, we need this, 20 years ago to the CIA, we have video of him saying these things of, hey, how we're going to decrease population and do all these things. Is this just, is it a couple guys at the top pulling the strings, or is it just this collective malaise and apathy of the people in centralized organizations? Like, how do you see this?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to say is that it's not a new problem. We can Google this, but wasn't Thomas Malthus in the 1700s?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I
So the
believe he
term
was.
that we're
Yes.
even
Yep.
using, Malthusian, this is a term that's centuries old. So since the 1700s, there have been people who clearly have been saying, hey, there's too many people on Earth and we're going to run into this overpopulation problem. And then I think it got another sort of big push in the 1970s. A lot of things went weird in the 1970s. I think that's really when it got a big push across the West. I'm not an expert on that. Um, so I understand why someone would believe that the world is overpopulated. Because if you live in certain cities, it looks that way. If you live in Mumbai, or you live in New York, or you live in London, or you live in LA, or you live in Paris, I mean, I've been to some of these cities, and I can see how if you live there and you see the traffic and you see the absence of housing and you're just seeing people and just all over the place, then it's easy to think, hey, the world is overpopulated, because we all have a sort of locality bias around the things that we're used to, both whether that's our neighborhood, or it's our city, or it's our nation as a whole. If you look at the USA, I mean, the whole world's population can very happily fit in Texas, like rather comfortably. Um, so, some people will say, well, it's not about the space, it's about the resources, right? That's the sort of standard thing people go to. And again, people have been saying this for many hundreds of years because, as you were saying, people struggle with exponential. And people tend to assume that certain things are a lot more static or linear than they are. So I don't know. Maybe you know the answer to this, Brandon. Would you know what was the human population of Earth at the turn of the previous century? So the year 1900. Am I right in saying it was
I think
under
it,
2 billion? I think.
yeah, I was going to say it's only a couple billion, I
Yeah, I
believe.
think
Yes,
maybe it was
correct.
around 2 billion, and so now we're obviously at 8 billion. So
Yep.
I mean, in 100, let's say 120 or so years, that is a massive
Yep.
multiplication. And people in 1900, with the technology that they had and the agriculture that they had and the resources and the logistics and all of that, at that time, they would not have probably been able to handle 8 billion people in the world. But no one considers technology. People don't consider the fact that we make advancements and that human beings are phenomenal problem solvers. So it can always seem in any moment that, oh my gosh, like we can't, you know, we're not going to be able to solve this particular issue. And people generally are not thinking, hey, let's have some faith and trust in humanity. Let's have some faith in innovation. There's fertilizers, for example, that they use now, which allow people to grow so like infinitely more food than people were able to grow not so long ago. If you look at advancements in medical technology, for example, this is why people are living longer. My dad's a doctor. My dad's been a doctor for over 50 years. And he says, this is like not, this is a sort of unpolitically correct point, but one of the issues, if you want to call it that, that you're actually having in a country like the UK, where you do have socialized medicine with the NHS, is simply that you've got an increasingly aging population. And now you have people who they're living, but they're alive with like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different ailments. A few decades ago, that person would have passed away. And now you have increasing numbers of people who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and they're still alive. And thank God people are alive, right? I wish everybody a long life. But it's sort of created this sort of strange issue, which again is not talked about at all because it's not politically correct. But it's like, wow, we have this increasing number of people, and people are living for so long, and we have the socialized healthcare system, so it's taxpayer funded, and it's getting very sort of top heavy because it's like, man, how do we continue to afford all this unless you're just going to, keep increasing taxes? And so we have this sort of strange problem where we're just in this. The whole issue itself, I guess, isn't totally new, but we're sort of in a unique place where, on one hand, I'm saying, yeah, there aren't enough births. And then on the other hand, it's like people are living for so long, which is wonderful, but that is now putting massive pressure on any nation that has socialized medicine. As far as I know, I think this is a big problem in China as well, even more so there because they have a huge population, 1.3 billion, and they also had their super anti-human and barbaric one-child policy for such a long period of time. So they've got this like very top-heavy population pyramid where there just aren't a lot of young people and there's a lot of old people. And Chinese people also have one of the longest lifespans in the world. God bless them.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have, if I look at where my family is originally from, I'm a Nigerian. by background. Do you know the median age in Nigeria?
I want to. Is it in their 30s?
20.
I can't remember.
20.
20. Wow.
So
Jeez.
half the population in Nigeria is under the age of 20. Um, I
Wow.
think in the UK that number is mid 40s. I want to say it's something like 43.
Wow.
In the US, I think it's somewhere around 40. I think in places like Germany, it's closer to 50, somewhere like 47, 48, something like that. And so,
Jeez.
yeah, I mean, the numbers kind of speak for themselves. Nigeria, the birth rate is 5. In America, I think it's 1.6. I think UK is about 1.4 now. And so, if you want to kind of see what's going to happen in the future as far as demographics and the population go, it's not too hard to work out. I mean, you can just look at the numbers and you can extrapolate and you can see, oh, wow, okay. Nigeria is on track to become the third most populous country in the world. It's going to overtake the USA. Right now, the USA is the third after India and China, and it's going to get overtaken by Nigeria. And then you could project down 50 years, 100 years, and you could probably just see, okay, what's the population of Earth going to look like? Doesn't look like there's going to be that many Japanese people or that many South Korean people, which, unless they can do something, unless they start to take this like really seriously. And I don't, it's a complicated problem too, man, because how do you even, assuming assuming you want to solve it, I mean, what do you even do that is moral and ethical and righteous to reverse course on some of these things? But I think the very first step is awareness, and I think at least now people are starting to talk about it. I mean, even just 5 to 10 years ago, even suggesting that underpopulation could become an issue, people would totally look at you sideways. Whereas I think some people still look at you sideways if you say that, but I think more and more people are starting to look at the data and be like, oh wow, actually, oh, like this doesn't bode well for the future. So I think the first thing is getting it on people's radar.
There's so many things that I want to ask you from that, but do you think that, like, so we talked about Nigeria really
Mm.
quick. I mean, it seems like they're rejecting central bank digital currencies there. The EU Naira is a very low adoption rate. They're trying to force, all the whatever is going on there. They got a lot of young people. Harry Dent always says demographics is destiny, and you just kind of laid that out perfectly. What part of the world has you most excited in those terms? I mean, it seems like Nigeria might be, I always think of Central and South America and Africa really being some of the greatest stories, I think, of the next century
Mm.
here. What do you think, just in terms of all your travel and things you see?
Yeah, man, fantastic question. So I live in Dubai now. I wasn't living in Dubai when we last met. I was just traveling and living nonstop in hotels for 3 years straight. And I had the option to live in pretty much any city of my choosing anywhere in the world. I mean, I'm location independent. And I settled on Dubai and the UAE. And I think that in itself says something. And I'm not the only one. There are this city and this country are growing. Now, I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in a Gulf country, Saudi Arabia. And so it's kind of interesting that all those years later, I decided to return to a Gulf country. And, I can give my reasons for that if you are curious. But I think that some of the countries in this region are going to continue to grow and prosper. I think that we are going to just increasingly see a multipolar world. I think the USA and the West in general's kind of ultra strong grasp on culture and the economy and the sort of global power is going to become more decentralized. You're already seeing, the de-dollarization in certain issue, right? I think our entire lives, as far as I know, I believe Saudi Arabia, for example, they've always sold their petrol and I believe their natural gas too in US dollars, and that is now shifting as of this year. So okay, that's interesting. I don't know all the implications of that, but that's certainly going to be interesting for the century. You're seeing the rise of the BRICS nations, and it looks like other countries are going to be joining that as well. So I think that a lot of what people in the West may consider sort of second or even third world countries, a lot of them, not all of them, but I think a lot of them are going to have a very significant rise this century. If you look at Dubai, I mean, have you seen pictures of what Dubai was like sort of 50 years ago?
Oh man.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you see what
It's
right.
wild.
And then I look out, I can look outside my window here, and it's like living in it's like living in the Jetsons, right? You know, I can see the tallest building in the entire world from just out my window.
Wow.
And that didn't used to exist. This whole place used to just be a big desert. So I think people massively underestimate how much things can change over time. So when people right now think of countries in Central America or South America or certain pockets of Eastern Europe, parts of the Middle East, parts of the Far East, we have a sort of, what would you call it? Maybe a recency bias, right? Because we only see things in the here and the now. And so you can see a certain country. Okay, take India. When people think of India, when someone in the West thinks of India, the immediate thing that comes to their brain is poor country, dirty, lots of people, maybe a bit backwards kind of thing, right? Like that's kind of the image we grew up with in a way, right? You're watching TV, you see a picture or whatever, and that's kind of what someone thinks, especially if they haven't been there. But maybe even if they have been there, but it's not going to just stay. It's not going to just like stay where it is. If you go back a few decades ago, nobody used to even worry about China in the West, right? China wasn't really in the conversation. People were worried about Russia. People were worried about Japan, right? The USA was worried about Japan. Everyone was thinking, oh, wow, Japan's going to be that's the next superpower. And then China just, right? China has just like flown past it, right? Like it in a relatively short period of time. And so these things just change. It's not always predictable. A couple of 2 months ago, I went to El Salvador for the first time. 10 years ago, who the heck wanted to go to El Salvador? 7 years ago, who the heck wanted to go to El Salvador? Dude, they lost 1/3 of their population. Things were getting so gnarly and so dangerous out of there. They lost 1/3 of their population. At their worst, at their most dangerous, they had triple the homicide rate of Haiti.
Yes.
Right. Haiti is not known for its safety. And
safe streets.
So El Salvador has quite literally, in under a decade, they've gone from being the most dangerous country by murder rate in the entire world to the safest country in the entire Western Hemisphere. Safer than the USA, safer than Canada, safer than all their Central American neighbors. Like that's crazy. If you think about it, 97% drop in homicide. And
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. First country. Who would have thought, if someone asked you 5 years ago, hey, what's going to be, just 5 years ago, let alone 8 years ago, what's going to be the first country to adopt a Bitcoin as legal tender? Maybe you would have thought, oh,
last on the bingo card. Yeah.
I know people who have moved there now. Like I've got friends from America who now live in El Salvador.
Yep.
And it's just like, who saw that one coming?
Yeah.
So my point is just that we can make some predictions. Like I'm happy to make sort of generalized predictions. I see more multipolarity. I see a huge amount of migration. When we think about migration right now, people tend to think of it from east to west. People tend to think, well, everyone wants to come to the US. Everyone wants to go to Canada. Everyone wants to come to the UK. I'm seeing a lot of west to east immigration going on. Obviously, I live in a country where that's just huge amount of that. The amount of British people who now live in the UAE is just crazy. And I see more of that happening. I can see more people moving to Central and South America. In fact, there's people in Mexico who are complaining that too many Americans are streaming over the border. So
I know a handful of people that did that too.
Exactly. So, and now we've got the rise of remote working. Because why do people even live in big cities to begin with? Because historically, that's where the jobs are. You got to live in New York. You got to live in London. You got to live in LA, San Francisco. That's all going to change. It's already changing. And I just simply see those trends accelerating. So I think we're actually due for a super exciting century. I'm very intrigued to see how it's all going to pan out. We probably won't live to see all of it, but fingers crossed, our future our descendants will get the chance to witness it. And I think it's exciting. We've definitely got some challenges ahead. There's some stuff which is quite scary, and then there's also stuff where it's just like, hey man, the world is becoming smaller in many ways. We're so interconnected. Our ability to find information and share it. I mean, look at what we're doing right now, Brandon. This is to any previous generation, this is basically witchcraft. What like where are you right now?
Uh, I'm in
You're
Michigan.
in Michigan, I'm in Dubai.
Yep.
We're
Yep.
having a
Yeah.
real-time
Wild.
conversation in HD, which not only we are going to be able to listen to, but which you're then going to be able to beam out
It's wild.
to thousands of people where they can listen to it from
Yes.
wherever they are, and it's virtually free. It's magic.
Yeah. It's literally magic. It's unbelievable. So in saying some of that, why, like you mentioned this, what were a couple of those reasons that you returned to the golf? I mean, I can only imagine that you're a little bit sick of the woke mind virus, maybe that's infected the Western countries. I have a feeling that might have something to do with it. So I'd love for you to just kind of hit on that for a
Yeah.
second.
Okay. I'll lay it out. It's pretty simple. Okay. No income tax, no capital gains tax, 9% corporation tax compared to 25% in the UK. And that's only on profits over $100,000. So first 100,000 free and then 9% above that. Okay. So that's pretty tough to beat. If I look towards the future, this means me having millions of more dollars or pounds in my pocket and in my family's treasury, which otherwise would be just going down the black hole of the government and whatever the heck they choose to do with it. So that's a massive factor, and I can't pretend it's not a massive factor. This is one of the safest cities in the world. It's also one of the cleanest cities in the world. There is no wokeness at all. There's no politics. There's no culture war. There's no wokeness. All the crazy stuff that you see on social media or on the television or all that, that's just DOA here. It's gone. You don't see any of it. You can come here in June. You will not see a pride flag. You're right, like, they're not transing the kids. They're not doing any of this.
Oh man.
So all of that is just a sort of dark cloud that is lifted off. And I don't just think for myself, but I want to start a family in the future. And I think about my future. I think about my future family and my children. And I'd rather not have to constantly, every single day, nonstop, be completely fighting against the culture. I'm happy to fight when I need to fight, but there's just this sort of nonstop. If you're someone who's more, for lack of a better term, conservative, or at this point, I would just say sane, and you live in a country like the UK or the US or Canada, it's like there's this nonstop battle now against the culture and against the politics and against the media and all of these things. And it's a fight that's absolutely worth fighting, but you shouldn't have to. People didn't need to have to fight against the culture so much, and now you do. Another thing I love about Dubai is it's a fantastic travel hub. So I can get to pretty much any city or country that I want to go to direct. There's flights all the time. I think just to the UK, they have like 20 flights a day or something ludicrous like that. So it's very easy for me to get to where I want to. I want to go to Miami, boom, direct flight. I want to go to Sydney, Australia, direct flight. I want to go to wherever it is, Istanbul. There's direct flights to San Francisco and LA even. It's a long flight. I've done it before. It's a long flight. But yeah, that's simple. And I've got a big family. And it's actually in the middle of where my family is. So my immediate family is based across 4 countries. We are in the USA, the UK, UAE, and Australia. So I'm actually in the middle of where all of my family is, right? So, and there's direct flights to all of those places. So I can see all of my siblings, my nieces, my nephews, my parents. I'm a flight away from everybody. So I might be geographically far away, but I'm only like depending on where they are, 7 to 14 hours away from them. So yeah, I mean, another thing I'd say about Dubai as well is it's just it's on a positive and upward trajectory. So I like to be somewhere where things are getting better rather than getting worse. So I love the UK. I love the UK. I love the USA, and there's certain parts of the USA that I feel are continuing to improve. But there's also many places that are declining. If I look at certain cities, if I look at Los Angeles, if I look at London, if I look at New York City, some of these big sort of legacy brand cities, they are honestly they're in decline. LA is not as attractive to live in. San Francisco is not as attractive to live in now as it was in 1995 or in 2005, or perhaps maybe even in 2015. They're just getting worse and worse. They're getting more expensive, but the homelessness is rising. The amount of people doing drugs out in the street is rising. The quality of some of the services and the roads, basic things, potholes in the roads, and just all of these sort of day-to-day things, these indicators of decline, they're just there, and there's no sign that it's going to get better. There's no impetus for it to get better. There's no incentive right now for the politicians to make it any better. And so all of that stuff is concerning. There's a good feeling that you get being somewhere where what, 10 years from now, it's going to be even better. That feels good. It has a certain energy. I'll tell you one more thing. I could, man, I'm going to sound like I'm on Dubai's payroll, but I'm absolutely not. I'm just being honest. And by the way, there are negatives too. I mean, right now it's like, it's evening over here and it's freaking 105 degrees and humid, right? Exactly. Right. So, like, I'm not saying everything is sunshine and rainbows. There's an absence of nature. There's not as much, beautiful lakes and trees and grass and all that stuff. I am in a desert. The last thing I'd say as well is Dubai attracts a lot of like-minded people. So because of the nature of it and even its location, it's very much a city of expats. Only 10% of the population is Emirati, right? So 90% of the population in the city is people who have come deliberately from other countries, from the East, from the West. Yes. So it draws a lot of entrepreneurs. It draws a lot of people who just, like, everyone here is here for a reason. It's part of why it's a factor as to why there's no crime, right? Because there's virtually no unemployment, right? There's no unemployment. There's virtually no homelessness. Everyone here is here because they want to work either for themselves or for whatever company has hired them. They want to look after their kids. They want to raise their family, and they just want to it's just normal. And it sounds so weird to say that. It's just like, it's, if I didn't go on the internet, then I would be sort of totally insulated from all the strange things that are happening in the world. And it's just sane. It's just normal. You don't have to worry about, when you're here, you realize how many things you sort of worry about when you're in many other places. And then you kind of come here and it sort of switches off and you can just focus on your work, and you can focus on sort of doing the things that we really should be kind of caring about, and not having to totally occupy yourself with, I don't know, just like, if I look, like where the US is right now, obviously it's an election year. The next 100 days are just going to be madness. I mean, it's like every day I log in the morning, and it's just like, okay, what crazy, what crazy. It's like, oh, okay, today they tried to kill the former president. Okay, today they decided to do this crazy thing in France with the Olympic ceremony. Okay, like, just every day there's something happening. Like, wait, what's going on here? It's just kind of mad. And look, I know that you can be, it's not like the whole USA is crazy or anything like that. I'm totally aware that most people are normal, and there's many places that you can live and ways that you can live where you are not having to deal with any of this crap. But it is still there. It is still there, and it does still have an effect on the culture. It is going to have an impact on future generations. And I think the society and that sort of cultural and community fabric is very important. And so I'm very much a believer in, shout out to Andrew Henderson, Nomad Capitalist. I am a believer in go where you're treated best. And when I just consider all the things that I think about and care about, and I think towards the future, I just made the decision that as a sort of official headquarters and place of residence, the UAE for the time being, I believe, makes the most sense for me personally. And it's not like I'm stuck here either, right? Last point I'd make as well is, it's so easy to gain residency and to maintain it. So um, I only have to be here one day every 6 months to remain a resident. I'm obviously here more than that, but there's some places where, you got to be there for 6 months a year, for example, to stay a resident. Whereas here, the requirements are just extremely low. So I can continue to travel. I still spend tons of time in the US. I spend tons of time in the UK. I can still travel as I already was traveling, but I don't need to do all of that and then still have to pay ludicrous amounts of money to the UK government, even though I don't even live in the country. So
Jeez. That's incredible. Well, that's pretty enticing. I'd say it's a pretty good list. Oh man, you you mentioned Andrew Henderson, and it's so true. I was at the conference this week. I was hanging out with the Plan B ladies, Katie the Russian a little bit, and Jessica Hodler. I had her on a few months ago on the podcast as well. So I think about them, and it's something you think about. The brain drain, right? Brain drain is real. Again, I'm in Michigan, and we saw this in Detroit. People leaving for decades ago, and then just in the last decade, we have people leaving the state because of the Great Recession and all the funny business that the politicians are doing. So now we're at a country level where people are leaving countries for brain drain.
Dude,
it's a very real
it's
thing.
a massive shame because sometimes people get me wrong, because sometimes I can be quite critical of the West and I can be critical of the UK and the US, and I'm only critical because I love and care about these nations. Like, I am British. I'm from England.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that I don't like the UK or something is crazy. Or the idea, I don't think many people think I'm anti-American. There are a lot of people think I am American. But
right.
these are fantastic countries, and it's sort of painful to watch them. I've called it committing cultural seppuku, right? It's like these nations, the greatest threat to America is not China. It's not Russia. It's not Iran. It is America. The threat is within. Yeah, it's this strange pathology that's just kind of going through the culture, and on different levels, it is harming and destroying people mentally, physically, spiritually. You've got, at this point, 70% of the adult population is obese or overweight, right? It's on track to hit 50% obesity by, I think, 2030, maybe 2035. That is scary. Like, that's never happened anywhere on Earth before. Like, how are you going to have half the population just so fat that they're putting their health at significant risk? This is a self-inflicted wound. This isn't an invasion that's coming somewhere else. People's minds. You're seeing antidepressant use is shooting up. The amount of suicides is going up. The amount of overdoses, over 100,000 per year now. That number, not so long ago, used to be under 20,000, and now it's over 100,000. I think last year, about 110,000 overdoses. And I think on top of that, another 100,000 from too much alcohol. And then on top of that, the actual suicides themselves. So you've quite literally got hundreds of thousands of your own citizens who every single year are dying essentially by their own hand. And then you've just got the cultural rot and the mind viruses, and you're looking at the schools and the universities, and it's just like, what is happening here? Like, to me, that's the stuff where I'm just like, man, this is just very concerning, because this is such a blessed nation. This is such a great nation on so many different levels. Like, I've said before that my biggest grievance with Americans is they don't realize how good they have it in many ways.
Apathy.
Yeah, there's the apathy, but there's also just the lack of perspective, because most people haven't left the country. Like, if you travel around the world, if you go to different countries and you see different places and you see how the average person actually lives, and then you come back to the States, you'll be like, yo, actually, hey, you know what? We've got some problems, but
like Brittany Griner.
Yeah, we've got some problems, but
she'll be standing for that anthem.
It's pretty freaking good here. Like, stuff just works. I feel the same in the UK. There's many places in the world where things just don't really work. Like, you switch the light switch and it's not guaranteed the light is going to come on. You turn the tap. No, I'm dead serious. Billions of people live like this. Right now, billions of people, you turn the faucet, and it's not like, oh yeah, water's definitely going to come out. Or if that water comes out, can you even drink it? No, in most countries around the world, no, you absolutely do not drink the water that comes out of the tap. It'll quite literally make you sick. There's still so many people. More people have access to mobile phones than I think have access to like flushing toilets. Right? There's still just basic sanitation, roads. Like again, my family background's from Nigeria, and like so many of the roads are just a mess. It's still like there's still a lot of dirt roads, and even the roads that are paved, some gigantic potholes, like huge, enormous potholes sometimes. And Nigeria is one of the richer countries in Africa. Africa is, I think, 54 countries, and there's still just, I don't know, man. There's still so much like just poverty and lack of access to basic amenities, and so that's another reason why like all the woke stuff already annoys me, but it annoys me even more because I'm just like, what are you people even talking about? Like, what are you even complaining about? Like, do you just know how well? Do you know how many people around the world would pay significant money or take a significant risk to just swap places with you? Why do you think so many millions of people are streaming over the border? Or in Europe, like people are literally getting on freaking like rubber dinghies and boats from North Africa and stuff, and they're trying to like come in. They're not doing that for a worse life. Sure, they should absolutely be doing it legally. I'm very anti illegal immigration. I'm very pro legal immigration. But the fact that people are doing that and they're taking those type of risks, like that should tell you about about where the opportunities lie, about where the economy is decent. Like people are, I don't know, man. We can all be detached sometimes, and it's impossible to sort of take on the entire world's burdens. But when you do see that and you keep it in mind and you kind of zoom out a little bit from your own problems, I think that's when you gain both perspective, but you also gain gratitude. Because when people don't have perspective, they usually don't have gratitude because they're comparing everything to this perfect fantasy land that exists in their brain rather than how the world was historically and also how most of the world is currently. And so you just get these complete detachments from reality, and people are just living in this bizarre, I don't know how many millions of people in the West at this point are just living in some weird, bizarre fantasy land that they sort of invented in their own brain. And I don't even know, man. I sometimes don't have the words for it, but it's frustrating and it's bewildering. It's just like, what is going on? Like this is real late stage empire vibes, and I don't want this thing to collapse. Right? I don't. I want the West to remain a leader. I want America to remain a leader in the world in many aspects. But if people just sort of collectively continue to do this, if the politicians and all these bureaucrats continue to undermine their own nation, undermine the country's values, not give a crap about the citizens, keep printing money, sending money overseas for stuff that doesn't benefit the people in that country, all of this stuff combined, it's just like, gosh, like what is going on? So I cannot even remember what the question you asked me at this point is. But yeah, I think that maybe I just needed to get that off my chest.
Yes. Yeah. No, I was well said. I mean, it makes me like you've laid it out so beautiful. Like I have 4 little ones, 7 and 5,
Beautiful.
3 and 1. I think we were only had 3 when I met you a few years
Awesome,
ago.
man. Congratulations, man. That's
And
what I'm aspiring
thank,
towards. Inshallah.
thank you. And you will for sure. That's for sure. You'll find an amazing lady and you guys will do the same. And we're homeschooling them now. They were in school for 2 years at a private Catholic school. And now it's just, like the time I just have a problem with little kids being in cinder block walls for 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
7 hours a day. I mean, the school is great, Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
ask
Go
you
ahead.
something? So
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it sounds like they were already in a good school. So you didn't pull them out for like
Yes.
ideological reasons, right?
No,
Okay.
nope.
Okay. So this is interesting actually, because that's not the case in your situation, but obviously you must know like millions of parents are taking their kids out of
Mm-hmm.
school because they're worried about the type of stuff that they're learning, and they are worried about the ideology
Yes.
and sometimes even worried about their safety. So this is kind of my point. So I think homeschooling is a dope idea, but it shouldn't be necessary. At least not for
Yes.
ideological reasons. Yeah,
Nuance.
it shouldn't be the
Absolutely.
case that people feel like I have to homeschool my children. Otherwise, they're going to turn into like some
Right.
weird little communist or something, right? Like that shouldn't be, people didn't used to worry about that,
No,
right? And now
no,
it's,
it's
yeah, go ahead.
100%. No, no, it's just like there's a study. I've brought this up a few times the last couple of weeks, and shame on me for not looking this up to get it completely right. But it was a couple of years ago. I'd heard this, like in Nebraska or somewhere in the middle of the United States, there was a school district that had gave their kids like 4 recesses a day,
Mm,
and the Ritalin prescriptions dropped to zero. So like just things like that, where like the school we're at, amazing
mm,
people, amazing curriculum, but it was a little bit of a distance for us to get there. The kids are still in school for 8 hours and there's only one recess. Like all these little things that just, to me, it was a function of the system and the kind of the world we're
mm,
in, where it wasn't so much their fault per se. We're all part of this system where you're kind of looking around and like, well, we're better than those people. But it's all relative, right? It's like, well, yeah, but they're like, preaching Satan in like government run schools. Just because you're not doing that,
mm.
like doesn't mean you're like a million times better, but you're just better, so like there's nuance to it. But like you said, you shouldn't have to bring your kids out of the school and into your home.
Mm.
I mean, it's great that they're around their parents more, the best teachers they have, but yeah, it's absolutely wild to see kind of where we've gone with, mental health,
Yeah.
the obesity, nutrition, this spiritual battle. And you kind of touched on this really briefly, but this good versus evil thing, everything to me now, it's very obvious that it's a spiritual
Yes.
battle. It's good versus evil everywhere you look in the world, right? It's really God and Satan battling it out, and people making decisions every single day. Am I going to get up today? And am I going to go, talk with Zuby, or am I going to go to under the bridge and leave my family and start shooting up heroin? Like that's a decision. I could easily go do that thing, but I choose not
Yeah.
to. And I choose to, hey, let's go do a productive thing. Let's go talk about productive things and take care of my family. And you're doing the same thing. So that to me is like, it's very base level. And so many people kind of miss that part of
Yeah,
it.
it is. And, I don't have children yet, but I do have 10 nieces and nephews. And I just care
Wow.
about children and young people in general. And I think that's something that so often just gets lost in the mix and in conversations. There's a lot of inversions that are going on in the West right now. And I'll tell you one of the greatest inversions. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. And this is putting the whims and priorities and feelings of adults over the needs and care of children. And when you see that, you can apply that rubric to so many things. And that's not how it's meant to be. I mean, children are really the thing that are, kids are meant to have priority over adults, on every scale. And so when you've just got millions upon millions of adults supposedly putting their just whims and feelings and whatever, like, oh gosh, I don't even want to bring up this situation. And like, I've never even spoken about this properly. But if you want to see the absolute, perhaps the absolute peak of this, beyond a million abortions a year, is this whole situation that's happening with so-called trans widows, where you have married men, husbands, fathers who have families, and they decide to quote unquote transition into a woman and pursue quote unquote their truth, ditch and abandon their family, and go parade in makeup and dresses and play pretend. And the response to that is not large scale disgust and condemnation and even ostracization. The result is clapping and cheering and, oh my gosh, she is so brave. This is wonderful. She's now living her truth. It's like, wait, like, what about his wife? What about his kids? What about dude, talk about dereliction of duty. I can't even, this is like worse. I mean, do you know what's crazy is like if someone did this and I don't know, they ran off with, it was the old school story, and I don't know, he ran off with his hot young secretary or something. People would condemn that. Even the woke people would condemn that. They wouldn't go, oh, he's just living his truth. But oh no, but if you put on a dress and you take hormones and you now call yourself a she and then you abandon your family, now this is something that we should celebrate and uplift. And this is the stuff that drives me mental, because I just see this and I'm like, how on earth is this how has this happened, but also how is this the response? And you see these things online, but at this point I have met women I've met women whose, in this case, fortunately, it was just a boyfriend, but I've met two women at this point whose boyfriends, like, this happened. I was like, oh, how, why did you guys break up? Oh, he decided he wanted to be a woman. And you're just like, oh, like, this is a
Wow.
new problem here. Like, this is right. Like, it's funny in a way, but it's also so dark. You're just like, geez, like, this is now a thing that women have to, like, worry about. You're now dating a guy, and you want to marry a man, and you now need to, like, confirm, okay, like, down the line, you're not gonna just, like, maybe decide to. And so yeah, I don't know. I just think that's crazy. I mean, we haven't even gone into all the stuff that happened with the period I refer to as the scamdemic. Another great example of people putting the feelings of adults entirely over the well-being of children. Right? You have this whole situation, and thank God you've got a virus which actually children deal with and handle pretty darn well. It's certainly not putting them at massive risk of severe illness or death. But the adults are scared, and so you know what? Screw the kids. Like, let's just shut down all the schools. Let's pull them out of this. Let's force masks on babies on 8-hour flights. Who cares if they're kicking and they're screaming and they absolutely don't need this thing and it's not helping them? Who cares? Let's shove injections in millions of their arms. They don't need it, but we can make money off of it. So let's just all of this stuff, man. It does frustrate. It really does frustrate me because I'm just like, this is an inversion. This is backwards. This is not how children are not meant to be sacrificing at scale because of adults. That's not how it's meant to go. It's supposed to be the other way. And the fact that people don't even feel some type of, like, shame or disgrace over that, I don't know. There's a lot there.
We used to, yeah, I mean, there it is. I mean, we could talk for, I know we're getting towards the end, probably, 5-10 minutes or whatever, but like, we could talk for hours on this. Someone was saying this the other day, they were like, we need to bring back shame, like we need to bring back shaming
Oh,
people
I say it
and
all the
like
time.
laughing at people and mocking people. Right. Yeah. I mean, and it might've been you even, like, I've been seeing this more lately, but it's just like, we do. I mean, like, you used to have that where it was, I forget what it was now. It was some post where someone, it was a thread too. Someone, some like OG Bitcoiner was talking about this years ago. And he's like, yeah, a guy, 40 years ago, he would say, hey, I'm going to transition to a woman. And he would just get laughed at by his buddies. And he'd go walk back to his house kind of dejected, but like a little better adjusted to the world. Now it's like this whole, he writes out this whole like 5-page thing of just the ridiculousness of like, now he's over here, we're throwing him parades. Like you said, we're stomping on children in order for him to feel like he's, it's just like, we live in a backwards world. Like you
Dude,
said, we don't care about.
no, people
Go
people
ahead.
don't even consider the children in some of these things. Like, it's not even
At all.
part of the conversation. It's just like, no one is going, wait, hang on. Well, almost nobody is going, wait, hang on a minute. Okay, it's one thing if a single person, a single adult who is, of age, decides they want to live their life that way. Do I understand it? Absolutely not. Do I condone it? Absolutely not. Do I think this is something that's good or pro-social? Absolutely not. But it's like, okay, dude, right? Like, that's what you want to do. Okay. But when it's a situation where it's like, okay, no, you've made certain commitments and you've taken on certain responsibilities. No, you can't just right. Like, no, you
Yeah.
can't you
I
can't
mean,
just do that. That is not
no,
okay. That is not permissible. That is unacceptable. And so, yeah, I don't know, man. But carry on. Sorry, I didn't even
it's,
mean to interrupt you.
it's, no, it's their, the children, like maybe the old, the sick, and the children. I mean, those are the meek and the humble of the world. Those are the ones that were meant to be taken care of. And it's like you said, if we have abortions going on, we talked about this good versus evil spiritual battle. How can anything, once you do that and you're like, I'm okay killing a child, how do you, like, I don't know how society can't be perfect after that. There's no way. There's literally no way
It's
after that. I mean,
dark.
not that we can even at all, I guess, but like, how? Like, you can't after
No,
that.
dude,
It's
it's
impossible.
dark. There's so
It's
much corruption. I think, the world has always been corrupt, and human beings have always been corrupt. I think what's happening now is it's so blatant. It's so clear, right? And anyone who just actually pays attention and is intellectually honest, you can just look at some or all of these things and just be like, there's something weird that is going on here, right? You saw that, just that Olympic ceremony the other day. Even people who are not religious, even people who are not Christian, even some outright atheists were like, I don't really like this. You know what I mean? Like something is weird here. Like why are they doing this? Why is this okay? The Olympics too? This isn't some random event. This is the most watched. I think after the World Cup, I think it's the second most watched event on planet Earth. Um, it's like why are they doing this? Whose idea was this? Who okayed this? Why didn't anyone? Why are we just mocking the religion of over 2 billion people? Um, so there's a lot of weird stuff going on there. You know, another point that just came up to me. I just saw this today. Obviously, one of my claims to fame was breaking the British women's deadlift record back in 2019.
I was just about to ask you about that.
Have
Yeah.
you seen what's happening with the Olympics and the boxing?
No, I have
Okay,
not.
there are male athletes competing in boxing against females right now. Right now, boxing.
Wow.
Boxing. It's happening today. So you want to talk about just dereliction of duty and not protecting people who I thought, hey, we're supposed to, as men, collectively, call me
Right.
patriarchal or whatever name, but we are supposed to protect the fairer and physically weaker sex. And we've now again gone, no, actually, we're going to allow men to identify as women, not just enter the bathrooms, not just enter the beauty pageants, not just enter the spas, but compete in combat sport. Like, bro,
Incredible.
how?
Incredible.
How?
It makes me think of I think she just died a few years ago, but she was, and I can't remember her name, but she was from World War II. She was helping Jews, escape concentration camps or whatever. And someone had asked her, like, what made you a hero, and she was just like, I was a hero. I just chose not to go over the cliff with the rest of society.
Mm.
And I feel like that's exactly what we're living through now, 100 years later, another fourth turning here, another life cycle basically going by where like this, we're having this conversation and we're like, what is it like? What's going on? Like, where is society going? And it's just like, we're just standing in place, maybe where we always were, but society is just careening off the cliff very quickly. And it makes me think like my buddy Aaron, I was like, hey, I'm talking to Zuby. Like, what do you want to ask him? He said he's been following you for years. And he's just like, you got to ask him about the weightlifting competition and and it seems great. This is a really crazy question the way I'm going to ask it, because if people have watched this whole thing, they're going to be like, well, that's obvious. But what made you snap at some point to say, hey, I'm going to do this? Because to me, like, if I was a 25-year-old kid right now with no family, I'd be entering everything I could, not combat sports, like you said, but I'd be entering everything just to collapse the system.
Yeah.
Like me and my buddies, like we'd be doing the most ridiculous things just to like make a mockery of it and make them admit that it's complete hogwash. So I would love for you to walk through that really quickly and like what made me do a snap. So I wish more people did.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
It's interesting because, I was one of the first people with a decent sized platform to really highlight the absurdity of the issue. I mean, this is over 5.5 years ago now. So I posted that tweet February 2019, and I'd been talking about the issue prior to that. So I'd say there were 2 points. I'll touch on them briefly. So I really started to notice our country's getting really weird from around 2014, 2015, the sort of beginning of the rise of what we now collectively refer to as wokeness, right? I started to see a lot of the weird stuff around gender, about race, about sexuality, just like becoming more extreme and becoming more incoherent. I think the Caitlyn Jenner thing, that was 2015. And that was really the mainstreaming of the trans ideology. And so, I saw the situation that happened with Fallon Fox in MMA. I saw that whole thing that went on with Bill C-16 in Canada, which led to the rise of, that's the thing that Jordan Peterson originally came onto people's radar for challenging the whole idea that people should be mandated to use preferred pronouns. I just started to see all these strange things happening. I remember when Ben Shapiro went to speak at, I think it was Berkeley, California, and students caused like, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage because they didn't want to hear a conservative speaker. The rise of so-called cancel culture and so on, just like the rise of the sort of illiberal left. And I was like, man, this is really strange. But I mostly was seeing things happening in the US and Canada. And then in 2018, something happened which made me realize, okay, this is really strong and this is really happening in the UK too. Um, I won't tell the entire story, but basically, there was a person that I knew who was a president of a university union in the UK. So this is a person in a a position of power and influence. And I actually, I've met him before. Where we followed each other mutually on Facebook, and he put up a post saying something about how he in regards to the University Debate Society, how he supports free speech, but he's against hate speech, and hate speech should not be allowed on university campuses. And I just kind of asked the simple question, well, who defines that? What exactly do you mean by you support free speech, but not hate speech? And he said, people shouldn't be allowed. He said people shouldn't be allowed to say things that are potentially offensive to others. So we were just having this sort of back and forth on Facebook, and I was just pointing out the obvious flaws in this argument, right? It's like, this is very subjective, bro. Like, people can't say things that are potentially offensive to somebody out there. Can you not see how this is hypocritical to say that and then say you support free speech and this could be weaponized against you? Anyway, long story short, one of the last things that he posted publicly towards the end of this conversation was, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, people like Zuby are dangerous and have ideas that could get people killed. I don't think people like him should be allowed on university campuses. So keep in mind, I had graduated from university um, about a decade before this. And I was like, okay, so between me graduating from Oxford and now, there is an idea that I shouldn't even be allowed on a college campus. Like, I don't know what you think about me, Brandon, but I think I'm a pretty moderate and reasonable, non-hateful person. I don't think anyone who knows me or who's interacted with me, regardless of how much you may agree or disagree with my politics, I don't think anyone could seriously describe me as a hateful, angry, venomous human being. And so I was like, okay, so a university president doesn't think I should even be allowed on a campus. I was like, so I think something snapped in my brain. I think something that's when I was just like, yo, this crap has gone too far. Like this is real. This isn't just stuff on the internet. Like, people really are holding on to this ideology. At this time, this is back when it was called like SJW, social justice warriors. People weren't really using the term woke, right? So I think something sort of snapped in my brain at that point, and I just started to get a little more aggressive on Twitter. I'd been on the app for over a decade, but I really just used it to promote my music and talk about my music and my merchandising and stuff like that. And I just started to sort of share some more ideas. And at the same time, sorry, I said I would be brief, but it's kind of hard to, I think the story is important. Um, this is also around the same time. So this is 2018. And you remember when, obviously you'd had all the craziness with like both the Trump campaign in the US and the Brexit thing in the UK. It was fashionable calling everyone a racist, calling everyone a Nazi, calling everyone, right? Anyone you disagree with, just call them a Nazi. Then eventually it escalated to white supremacist. This is around the time in the US. You remember the time period when Kanye West came out publicly wearing the MAGA hat? Yep. And the reactions to that were crazy, right? So my first ever internationally viral tweet was not the deadlift one. It was actually a tweet just saying something like, LOL at all the people calling Kanye West lost. Maybe he's not the lost one. And that went quite viral in like American conservative Twitter. So I remember I started gaining all of these followers from like all these conservative followers from the US with like, the American flag in their bio and Patriot and MAGA and whatever. And I was a bit like, whoa, like what, what is happening here? I'm a rapper from England. Like, why am I getting all these, American right-wing followers? And then, but with me, I was never in the camp of, I always said, had I been American, I would have voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020. Like, I'm very open about that. And so I just kind of kept doing what I was doing. But this was kind of when I just began commenting a little bit on what I'm seeing in the world. And then, of course, there's this whole issue going on with like the trans nonsense, and it's just not making sense. When I was in university, it was called the LGB Society, and by this time, it's like LGBTQIAAP2S plus. So I'm like, wait, we've gone from LGB in like 2005 to what looks like a computer password. Um, and we've got men saying they're women, women saying they're men. You've got celebrities like people are making up pronouns. Facebook used to only offer 2 options of pronouns. Now there's like 80 choices. I'm just like, this is all crazy, right? And I started to see what was happening with women's sports. I clocked that very early. And out of curiosity, so the day I posted that, I was actually running one of my pop-up shops in a city called Derby in England. And I'd seen the stories of college level, I think high school or college level athletes in the US, boys breaking girls' records. And I was just like, I'm just scrolling Twitter and I'm like, this is freaking goofy. Like, what is going on here? And then my brain was just like, man, I wonder what the British women's deadlift record is. Like, I'm a strong guy, right? Like, I was like, I wonder what the deadlift record is. So I just Google searched it, and it was like in my weight class, it was 210 kilos, and my PB was like 275. So I already had a video on my phone of me pulling 230. So I just typed it out. I was just like, I keep hearing about how biological men have no strength advantage over women in 2019. So watch me destroy the British women's deadlift record without even trying. P.S. I identified as a woman whilst lifting the weight. Don't be a bigot. So I just tweet this out, 9-second video. I had 19,000 followers on Twitter at the time. And I was like, I don't know what I've done, but I've just done something. I'm looking at my phone. I'm just I'm just looking at my phone, and I have never seen the numbers going up so quickly. So
just refresh. It's just
dude,
like
no, because when you go really viral, you don't even need to refresh it. The numbers just tick up. So I'm just seeing the likes and the retweets just going up and up and up and up, and I'm just like, what the heck? The video hit like 50,000 views, I think, in the first hour, and then 100,000, 200,000. By the time I go to bed that night, 300,000. Wake up in the morning, 500,000. I start getting contacted by the BBC, Fox News, Sky News, all these. I'm just like, what on earth have I just done? Like, I get people asking me like, oh, did you plan it? Was that like a PR stunt or what? I was like, no, I just put it out like I put out my other tweets. I just thought this is kind of funny and it's making a point. If I like it, other people are, it'll get a few laughs. And it was just being shared all over the world. And then Joe Rogan discovered it. And then Ben Shapiro discovered it. And then Tucker Carlson does a segment on it. So I'm just in England, bro. Like I'm just chilling in England. Like, and now I've got like all these people who are and at this point my followers are just growing 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, what is even happening here? And it just kept going and growing. And then I got the opportunity to be interviewed by some of these people, right? Ben Shapiro invited me on his show, Steven Crowder, Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin, Candace Owens, like all of these people. So there was just this snowball effect where I got an opportunity to go on these platforms and just share my ideas, or obviously talk about the deadlift, but talk about other things going on. And then I think at that point, people were like, oh, like, okay, this guy's not a one-trick pony. He's got a very interesting story. Oh, he makes music. He's got a podcast. He's into fitness. He's got some good advice and some interesting takes on society and culture and politics. And oh, he's an Oxford University graduate. Oh, he's born in England, raised in Saudi Arabia, right? So I was able to just kind of tell my story and share my personality. And this is all 5 years ago. And so I've just been able to continue the momentum by offering value and occasional entertainment and information to people across the world in a range of different sectors. So it's not exactly how, when I set out and I became a full-time musician, it's not the way that I thought most people would discover me and discover my voice. But, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And we can't always sort of predict the things that are going to resonate with people. And so, I was able to sort of take that moment and use that attention gained to build more attention towards the things that I do that are truly of value and that can help people out in some way, shape, or form. So here we are.
We'll finish up really quickly with one. My brother-in-law, Skylar, he said that the conspiracy, you had a tweet from a year ago in January saying that every conspiracy theory you've talked about is now a verifiable fact. Is there anything else kind of leave the audience with that you're on the radar with, that you're like, you know what, this is happening. This is probably going to come true in the future.
Oh boy. A conspiracy. Not off the top of my mind right now, but
we might have to do a part two. I have so many things in the few months. We'll have to. Yeah. Okay. We should come back.
Everyone, follow me on social media at ZUBY Music, and follow me on everything. I'm on X. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. All of them at ZUBY Music, ZUBY Music, and you can also check out my music and my podcast on all platforms. So go to zubymusic.com and you'll find links to everything.
Thanks so much, brother, for being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you,
Brandon. Great to chat.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the host and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards, where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world, one collectible physical trading card at a time, by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.